Hey there, if you're loving the tips so far, make sure to hit that subscribe button and tap the bell so you never miss out on more cool free tips coming your way. I'd also love to hear from you. Make sure to drop a comment below and let me know what you think, or what it is you want to see next. And we'll see you on the inside. See you. And it all started with this thought around become the person when nobody's watching that makes you worth looking at when everybody's looking. It's I just love that. Become the person when nobody's watching that makes you worth looking at when everybody's looking. And it's been such a great week in the Loan Officer Breakfast Club. You were in there last week. Just a great conversation around mindset and around overcoming the fears and the anxieties that so often, we and listen, we are big proponents of take massive action, because
Right.
we know confidence comes in taking massive action. In this season, Jim, what I really sense is not only is it massive action, but I want to keep the conversation around while we're taking massive action. Let's get in and do a little bit of heart work as well, because when we
Yes.
recognize that our past experiences, um,
Mhm.
they actually are what help us frame future expectations. And that's what's really come up, Jim. And listen, you're listening on the podcast. I get my twin brother, Jimn Kyles, who's not only my best friend on the podcast, but I mean, he's such a gifted communicator. He loves people, loves God. He is a pastor of a thriving church in Richmond, Texas. And he wrote a book called Unstuck and Unstoppable. And I got to tell you, I've got everybody in my boot camp going through it. I've got my national sales team here at the network at S&P going through it, because what I really believe is this, Jim: action helps. And I think you can have massive success taking action. Believe that. But I also think we need to take a few moments and just uncover what causes the fear of rejection, the fear of failure, the fear of, the number one thing I hear, Jim, is, dude, I'm so terrified of the phones. I've got all this call reluctance. What if they reject me? And so I thought
Wow.
that's where, it's just been so powerful. Let's talk a little bit about that.
Hey, well, first off, thank you. I want to say, and it's been a great couple of weeks. We've been jumping in and on and off some podcasts together, and just a huge thank you to invite me to be a part of your show. Want to say thank you to the audience as well. They show up each and every week, and man, it is so true what you're talking about. I think, and we touched on it in one of our Zoom calls, that it's important not just to produce a lot of work or actions and get a lot of work done,
Mm,
but it's important to be a healthier version of ourselves.
mm,
A healthier version of you when you show up will always produce a greater result. And what good is it for us, right? If the Bible says, gain the whole world, but lose your soul. And of course, the Bible's talking about salvation, but we could make that a case for even success in business. What good is it if you applied that into other areas of your life
yeah.
to make $1 million or $10 million or $100 million or $1 billion and lose your family, lose your health, lose your soul? Every part of your life you've given over to this beast, and
Mm.
you've done one thing really well, but the rest of your life suffers. And so I always find it best when a healthy person shows up. And part of that is sharpening the axe, right? We talked about that. Sometimes we go to chop down the tree and you're really good at swinging that axe. But if your axe is not sharp, you lose the effectiveness. And so we don't like soul care. We like skills and tactics and disciplines. And I know your audience are people that are motivated. You don't have to come in and motivate them, but sometimes it takes the sharpening of the axe, and that time is
Mm,
always well spent.
mm. Hey, and I think you said a couple of things, and when I hear things like it takes everything, the thoughts that come to mind, having done this for 23 years and knowing what our top producing loan officers and branch managers are going through, you'll say things like this, and here's what I found, Jim. it wasn't even that I was saying it. I'll never forget. It wasn't until about 3 or 4 years ago. We grew up in a family where the one thing we learned was how to work hard. Nobody was
Oh
going to
yeah.
outwork my dad. I mean, it was like
And we worked hard.
yeah, and even like I remember growing up, Henry Labrie, the people in and around our lives, we knew how to work. And
Right.
my mantra was nobody will outwork me, as is the mantra of so many people that are listening today. And that's why you're top producers. But what happens is what I found myself doing probably 3 or 4 years ago, and this is where it changed everything. See, you're in a place where you're willing to do the work, you'll show up big, but our every area, you said the word soul care, all
Yeah.
like our work thrives, but everything else falls apart. And here's what I heard from Stephanie, my wife, and Ethan. It was they began to resent what I did because it got all of me and the
Right.
best of me.
Right.
And part of that was this innate fear of failure, that if I stop running, that I'll
Hmm.
fail. You know,
Right.
and it was all of these past experiences, not recognizing a couple things. More doesn't mean more time. And if I rest, or if I focus, and if I have hard start, hard stop times, it doesn't mean you're not a hard worker.
Hmm.
You know, you're not showing up in a big way. What I began to realize was I could do the least amount of work that gave me the desired result, and I still win. And there's
Right.
something to that. So, hey, talk about that, because I think it's easy for our audience to say, man, I know how to work. I know how to show up. I got that.
Y-
Talk
Yeah,
about
working
soul care.
hard. Yeah, the soul care, I think that's where you got to go back into, you were talking about call reluctance.
Yeah.
Look, there's a difference between discipline, and then so discipline is the daily action. It's what I've got to do. But then there are some things that we self-sabotage. We have
Mm,
fears. You got fear of rejection, you got fear of failure. I mean, think about fear, what it does, it paralyzes us.
mm,
Fear that you got to fight, flight, or freeze. So sometimes when you're afraid, you just freeze. You're like, I don't know what to do. Others, you run from it, and sometimes you just get hostile, because then someone will say, hey, well, you should be
yeah.
making those calls. You're like, you'll come up with an excuse. You begin to fight back instead of just receiving. Say, hey, look, something's not right. And we talked about this in one of the Zoom calls. Identifying a place where it comes up often. Someone will say, the book I wrote is called Unstuck and Unstoppable. Shake off the past, find your purpose, get on with your life. And someone will say, every time I do a certain thing, I feel like, and this is past experience. Like we talked to one of the callers, or the loan officers, he had a call reluctance and said, I don't feel it all the time, but there's some days in between calls, I'll feel it, go a day or two, couple of days, and I'll feel it again. I'll be like, man, what is that anxiety? What is that keeps coming up? And what I look at is, if you're consistently having a certain feeling, emotion, procrastination, fear of, paralysis, running from,
Yeah.
and it keeps coming up, that's a place you're probably stuck. And so I don't get frustrated at myself. I'm actually grateful that it has showed up, so that now I can deal with the problem that
Mm,
has probably been sabotaging my life. I
mm,
wish time was the great healer of all things, but it's not. It's a
yeah.
revealer. And if you will begin to evaluate and look at, it can begin to reveal the things that have sabotaged your life. And I find the older you get, the less you really want to see what is actually there. So that's why I love what you do. Coaching is great. But coaching doesn't do any good if, when I'm getting coached, I'm defensive every time, or I got an excuse. I say
Mm,
this all the time: excuses only validate your perspective, it validates your reality. Get a coach and let them dig in and get after
mhm,
it and say, wow, that's interesting. I've never thought of that. Let me consider. And
mm.
then let that reveal what is the real root issue. And so much of that is past pain and trauma. We've talked about that. When you told the story of, even, man, what was that big slogan you used to say, and you still say, if anything's worth doing,
Yeah, anything worth doing
just,
is worth doing badly. Just get started. And that came out
yeah.
of a point of pain.
That's right. Well, that's where dad had the restaurant, and they had the dinner run, the lunch run, and you're back there helping dad. And You're doing the best you can. And he comes back and, what was, you're peeling shrimp or something, right? You're
Yeah,
peeling
I
shrimp,
was,
you're
yeah,
back there.
yeah, and hey, but Jim, you know what's interesting because he didn't say it. Dad was so calm and so collective. He very rarely raised, he
Raise his
didn't raise
voice.
his
Yeah.
voice. Yeah, and in that moment though, he said so. He's like, "Son, if you're gonna do it right." And I must have been goofing off like a teenage kid would
Right.
do.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until, you know what it was, Jim? Probably about 7 years ago, I actually started the podcast before it actually launched. I had 8 episodes that sat out on Apple for years, 2 years, as a matter of
Wow.
fact. And I just could, it was like this fear of what if it's not perfect, this fear of what if. And it wasn't until this season of reflection, Jim, I went back and I'm like, why is this the hardest thing I've ever done? And it could be
Wow.
the beginning of making phone calls or doing Thor's hammer or reaching out to agents or calling past clients. And you know what I did? And you said this, we were talking about you have to take time to reflect and you got to ask, because this is what I've been helping people with this week. Where was the first time I saw it? Where was the first
That's
time I
right.
heard it? What was the first time I felt it? Or where was the first time I smelled it? When your
Yeah.
senses are heightened. And so,
Hmm.
like for me, I just, and this is my belief, but I just went in and just said, God, I don't know why I feel it. I recognize it because you can't tame what you don't name, but there is a fear of taking action. And I feel
Right.
like I'm in this paralysis of prepare, but nothing gets done. And you know what I did? And it wasn't like this 4 days of just soul searching. It was whether it's on a mower or whether it was just in a hot tub or whether it was riding your bike, just going reflective. And Jim, that's where I remembered the first time that happened was when Dad said that. And then I
Right.
began to walk through why that was such something that impacted me. And then I
Right.
began to counteract it with, hey, listen, I've got to take the lie, reframe it. The truth is, there's nobody who's done anything for the first time that it was any good. So how do we
Right.
reframe it? Anything we're doing is not worth doing right. It's worth doing badly. The problem is you
Yeah.
just got to
Just
get
getting started.
started. That's it.
Yes.
And hey,
Yes.
but how many times does that happen? Like an agent said, "You're the worst lender I've ever worked with. You missed this closing. I can't believe it. I'll ruin your local reputation. If you won't do it, I'll find another." No, 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 but that's what you'll hear,
No, I
Jim. It's
know. I
like
know. I'm just having flashbacks. You and I have done
for those
real
of you who are
estate.
listening, Jim
Yeah.
actually was in the business with us for a few years. But
Yeah.
you
I was
hear
in the,
all those negative
yeah.
tapes. But Jim, that's what they hear
Hmm.
now. And oh, you'll hear this. Here's another one. Man, you know what? Oh, I tried that once. It didn't work.
Mm.
Or I hired somebody and man, they took my business. I hired somebody, they
Wow.
sabotaged what I was doing and I tried to get help and that didn't work. And all of a sudden these past experiences now
Hmm.
affect our future progress because we're
Sure they do.
so
Well,
it's
it's unresolved. So here's how I say it: unresolved pain always expresses itself in your life. It'll always show up.
mm,
And that's what you're looking for because it's the unresolved pain of those words. I think I'm laughing when you were talking about it because we owned a real estate investment company together. We did mortgages together. I worked for you for several years. You graciously employed me while I was in Houston and bivocational as a pastor, and they're brutal, man. And I don't think realtors and closing agents all mean to be, but they're under pressure, duress, and all they ever know is the authoritative demand. But just remember this: I love what Eleanor Roosevelt once said. She said, "Nobody can ever make you feel inferior."
mm,
So if
mm,
when they say that you
mm,
receive those words, you have to understand the only reason you receive those words is because you believe the lie. Like, somewhere in your past, those words compound on a reality that you believe.
mm,
And a lie is not powerful in and of itself. It's a believed lie because a believed lie is just as powerful as the truth itself because it now becomes your truth and your reality. And that's why
mm.
you have to go back and you have to deal with the past pain and the past trauma. I
Yeah.
mean, when I think of someone berating me as a loan officer, if I was a loan officer today, and trust me, I have my own moments, even pastoring church, different places, different things. You just smile and you can begin to feel sorry for people because you recognize that they're only expressing the reflection of how they feel of
Mm,
themselves. And
mm,
when they berate you, that's how they feel about themselves. And so
yeah.
when you understand that and you're confident in who you are, which is what I even talk about in the book, there's four things that make you unstoppable. Number one, it's discovering your identity in Christ. Number two,
Mm,
it's your purpose. What is the assignment I'm supposed to be doing today? That has to be resolved. You can't be like, well, am I supposed to do this or am I supposed to do that? No, you got a purpose. What is that? What are you supposed to do? Get your hands busy and do it. Third is vision. Where are you going? What's your tomorrow look like? And then the fourth is the subconscious, the paradigm that frames our lives. The paradigm is the subconscious pattern of thought that runs the programming of our life. In fact, we have anywhere from 12 to 60,000 thoughts in a day. In a day, 12 to 12,000 to 60,000 of those thoughts. It's absolutely unbelievable. 80% of them are negative and 95% of them are repetitive. They repeat over and over and over again. And it is fascinating to
wow.
me to see if we don't pause and understand why is it that I'm sabotaging? Why is it that I continue to face that same anxiety, that same frustration, that same
Hmm.
place where I get frozen, I hit a wall, then the reality is your life won't change. And so
Yeah.
that soul care is not even just a recommendation, it's a necessity. You have to do it. Some of you, that is exactly why you are where you are today, is because that is the piece. You can try to employ discipline, you can try to employ a coach, you can try to employ all the strategy you want, but if we don't deal with our soul, you will always limit yourself. Eventually you'll come to that wall
Mm.
that you have to deal with if you're going to go any further.
Dude, that I mean that well, it goes back to the self-sabotage. That's why,
Yep.
I've had friends where it's like massive success, and every time they hit that level, they find a way to make it come crashing down. And hey, that's powerful. Like you were even talking about that 80% of our thoughts are negative and 95% of those thoughts are automatic. You don't even
Automatic.
recognize it.
Don't even
And
recognize it.
and it goes back to the pre-programming of what we've heard, what we've
Hmm.
seen, what we felt in our
Yep.
lives. And
Yep.
and hey, you said a couple of things, man. Like, and I love this. Time's not a healer, it's a revealer.
That's
That's
right.
powerful because you know what'll happen is here's where it shows up. Every year you go through your employees. Why? Because you
Hmm.
got about a 1 year cycle that they can last near and close to you, but you're like, I don't know why people only last a year. I don't know why
Right.
I'm at the same company only two
Yeah.
years because every 2 years I'm changing jobs. It's probably a good indication. And listen, I'm meant for this to be a feel good, but you got to realize I'm your friend and I want to help you get
Yeah.
unstuck. And that's why Jim's here, is because there are things in your life that are holding you
Mhm.
back from what God's called you to do and the impact he's given you, or the potential impact he's placed on the
Mhm.
inside of us, if we'll get unstuck and begin to recognize that it's going to take a little bit of work, but if I'll do it, I'm
Yes.
going to break through and that impact's going to make an even greater impact. And when you see that time is not healing, then
Mm.
let it reveal what it is we've got to address, because as we identify it, now we can work through it. And hey, listen, the dude, I love it. Unresolved pain will show up. Would you say, how'd you say that? It'll show up how?
It always expresses itself in your life. It always
There you
shows
go.
up. Always
Dude, I
expresses.
love it. Like, so it's
Unresolved
like
pain.
where are these little hot spots? That's kind of like
Yeah.
what I
Oh
think
yeah.
about. Like,
Well, that's exactly. So the greatest one of a great way to figure out if you have pain, we call it trauma. Trauma triggers um, is that if you go from 0 to 5 or above in a
mm,
moment, it's like someone says something, you were cool, but the moment they said it, you like flipped your lid. And a lot of times you'll hear people say, "Wow, that was childish," or "Wow, you feel childish." After you step back, you're like, "Ooh, goodness, I shouldn't have said that, done that. What in the world just happened?"
yeah,
Well, you're correct when you say that's childish, because what's happened is the inner child has
yeah.
now showed up into the present reality. And so that 5-year old, that 10-year old, that 11-year old, that 7-year old that was hurt back in the past where the pain wasn't resolved in a moment, that's why it's a trigger, boom, shows up right now in the present. Well, where they don't act like a
Mm,
child.
mm,
They don't think straight. reason straight. Like it's like you have now showed up and that reality is manifested and you feel embarrassed. A lot of times you feel embarrassed, you know. You'll
Yeah.
see celebrities that will have these moments that they play over and over again on TMZ. What happened was that trauma, that pain, that wound wasn't healed and
Yep.
it showed up and now they're apologizing on this apology tour. But that's what we don't want to happen. And think about with realtors and the clients that you have, all it takes is one or two or three of those, and your name starts to get out like, wow, hey, they're great until they're not, you know, it's and so you just want this healthy version
Mhm.
showing up and then overcoming some of it is discipline. Listen, some people are just lazy. Well,
Yeah.
we can't help laziness except for get a coach and remain accountable to the daily disciplines. Look, you're not
Yep.
going to close 10, 15, 20 loans a month if you're not prospecting. I'm sorry, you're
Mhm.
just not.
Mhm.
You got to
Mhm.
make your phone calls. You got to get into uncomfortable conversations. Look, you've got to learn how to win friends and influence people. You got to go listen to Dale Carnegie. You got to go study his stuff. You got to go look at and study how do you close a sale. Those are skill sets. So we're not talking about natural skill sets. Like if you want to go play in the NBA and be a pro basketball player, you're going to have to learn the fundamentals. You're going to have to practice. Kobe
Mhm.
was the best because he practiced. And they say he'd show up earlier than anybody else. Well, no wonder he was the best. Of course, he had some skill. So look, all the listeners now, you can even be naturally talented, but you got to find a time that says, "Hey, look, talent will take me so far, but now I've got to get into the discipline of."
Yeah.
And so it's a both and. It's the soul care, it's the health of my soul, the emotional, healthy emotion quote. Uh, that's my alarm. There you go. And so you're getting to where you're just going to, my soul is healthy, but then also my skill set is professional. I am
Mhm.
going to show up and make sure that I am professional in my skill set and disciplined. So,
Hey, listen,
yeah.
I want to encourage, look, everybody who's listening today, go to Jimn, Jimn Kyles, Kyles, Jimn Kyles. And yes, there is an N at the end of Jim, Jimn Kyles, Kyles.com, jimkyles.com. Hey, here's what I want to challenge you to do. I know we talk about our boot camps and we talk about our coaching and all that. I'm asking you, do this, get his book. Allow these next 30, 60, 90 days. And look, he's got a ton of resources. He's got a podcast. The reason why I'm really talking about this a whole lot in all the circles, whether it's the network at S&P that I get the privilege of leading, or the coaching stuff I do at the Mortgage Marketing Animals, all of the different areas, is because I just feel like we're in a season, and hear my heart on this, that if we will work through the past pain, you're going to be set up for one of the greatest mortgage environments you're literally going to ever experience in the next couple of years. I believe we're getting a tailwind. And if we're going to do more, it's more than just being busy. It's about being effective and living healthy lives in our
Yes.
finances, in our emotions, in our health, in our families, in our personal thoughts and beliefs about who we are. Good. So get his book. It's super, I mean, easy to read. Listen to the podcast, work on yourself. And I love it, because if you're feeling things like you feel inferior, I love that quote what Eleanor Roosevelt said, no one can make you feel inferior. Well, if I'm feeling it, where's that coming from? Look,
Right.
actions are neutral. It's there is something internal inside of each one of us
Hmm.
that either makes it positive or negative, but something that's done to me can't have an emotion attached to it.
Right.
My experience can attach the emotion to that has happened to me. And these are the things, whether you, if you said, Steve, hey, I'm struggling with call reluctance, man, I'm struggling with staying disciplined, I'm struggling with staying motivated. Hey, Steve, and I hear these things all the time. I don't know there's anybody talking to any more one-on-one loan officer conversations and group calls than I am across the country. And I hear, I'm struggling with purpose. I heard
Mm.
a guy yesterday, Jim. I talked to him, killer producer. 2 years ago, a couple of years ago, made $800,000 in a year. Like,
Wow.
this guy is successful in our business, on his way to $1 million. Some things happen. Listen to this. We're on the phone yesterday and he tells me, bro, I've been lost for 2 years. He said,
Wow.
I can't, like, I am lost. And you know what? And I hear, I'm lost, I'm struggling, call reluctance. Man, I try to take action, but I'm afraid. Hey, what if if I go do something and I don't get the results, and it's all this fear that's why
Wow.
I'm so passionate right now that you can break through. God's got a purpose for your life. He's got a plan for
Yep.
your life. You're made to impact the people in and around you serve every day. And you playing small is not helping. We got to play big. And playing big means it's time to go to work on our heart. And the way Jim said it, soul care, man. I got to figure out what's going on the inside while I take massive action so that you can have the time freedom, the money freedom, the relationship freedom, the purpose freedom, the freedom in your life that you know you're supposed to have. JimKyles.com. Go to it. Jim, give us some closing thoughts, man.
Yeah, just again, super honored to be here with you. And here's the big thing that I would do. Sometimes you can feel very overwhelmed when it comes to something that may be a new area of learning or discipleship or transforming in your life. I'd love to just help you in that journey. I've got 12 chapters in the book. First, you got to get unstuck. What's causing you to get stuck, and then here's what I would do: just a little bit every day makes a massive difference. And so stay connected to Steve, continue to get coaching. And I do agree. I think that we're stepping into a new season that it has been hard. It has been difficult and still going to probably be at some level. But I do see opportunity. And that's the thing that we want to look through the filter of where people see challenges. I think I was on your call the other day. See yourself as an elite problem solver,
That's it.
someone that is out there solving problems, making a difference. And that's ultimately what you're about, not just making money, but touching and changing lives one
Yeah.
mortgage at a time.
Hey, listen, and let me just say this for the book. Again, go to jimkyles.com. But what I love about it too, I think it was in chapter 4 or 5. You've got QR codes throughout the book that'll take you to
Yep.
additional video resources and workbook resources. I saw one, I
Yep.
was going back through the book literally yesterday, and you had a whole small group curriculum. And then you had one that was, here's how you very practically identify the thoughts, and then you
Yes.
literally walk us through it step by step. And look, the reason, look, Jim's my twin brother, but I'll tell you this: he's on this podcast because he's got tools that are practical and can help you get unstuck and do it right now. It's not painful. It's not, well, you might walk through some pain, but you're going to be able to have a step by step guide on how to identify what it is you're working through. And I love that about the book because you click, literally, I put my phone on the QR code and your workbook came up, and I
Yeah.
literally could move it over to my Remarkable, or I could print it. And now in the morning, 15 minutes in the morning, I just go in and start working on one at a time. Hey, I'm going to do
That's right.
this. And it's one step upon another step. So get the book. JimKyles.com is where it's at. It's called Unstuck and Unstoppable. He's got some podcast resources, but the book's powerful because of the additional QR code
Codes
resources.
and
You've actually
resources.
created all these little mini workbooks inside. So hey, I love you, man. Grateful to have you.
Love you
And
too.
I'm going to keep bringing you back too, because there's such a passion, man. Every one of my coaching calls today that we did for our 8-week boot camp, dude, we drilled deep in identity. Hey, you know why? And I know we got to close the episode, but I'll tell you what really came up. And this came up from our conversation. You were a part of my national sales network call this week in our sales team. And you know what came up was people are trying to get results, and everybody's doing a bunch of activity to get results. But here's the problem: you have to do the right activity to get results. And here's the even bigger problem that we're not talking about as an industry: that you can do the right work to get the right result for a small amount of time. But to get lasting results, you have to start with becoming the person
Right. Right.
that will do the work, that the work will give you the results. And that's where the sabotage comes in. We're talking about doing, 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 and we never get into the real core heart of the matter, which is becoming the
Right.
person that does the work that gets the results. And that's how you have long-term sustainability and long-term growth. And that's why it's just been so passionate, is because we're not talking enough about being, and what you're saying is being is what matters most.
That's right. You said it so well. Yep.
All right, guys. Hey, listen, continue to listen to podcasts. Go buy Jim's book, jimkyles.com. And I can't wait to see you on the next episode. Remember this, anything worth doing is worth doing badly. Just get started. See you.